guess the biggest thing about checking your tires is you want to check for tread depth. You can usually use a tool for that, or you can use a coin. You also want to make sure that you don't have any like large gashes in the sidewall, especially, because that's like one of the weakest parts of the tire is the sidewall. You want to make sure you don't have any nails or anything poking through. And another thing is you want to make sure that your tires are wearing evenly. You usually want to do that by jacking the car up, kind of checking out, like measuring tread depth inside versus outside on the width of the tire. And the biggest reason you want to do this is it's all about safety when it comes to checking your tire. So you need to take your tire off, or your whole wheel in general. You usually want to use a jack. The easiest way to jack it up is you have to pick a right spot. You can't just jack up anywhere. If you try and jack up on this plastic trim, you're going to probably break it. So when you're looking underneath the car, like this, there's usually like, I don't know, 4 to 5 inches of this pinch weld, it's called. And this is usually the safest place to jack it up at. If there isn't a section where the pinch weld can be jacked up at, you usually want to look farther in. Sometimes you can jack it up by like a subframe mount or another area that looks pretty sturdy. But biggest point is just don't jack it up where, don't just throw the jack under there and start jacking it up. Just look for a really sturdy area so you can safely jack it up, and it's not gonna cause like any kind of safety risks when you're trying to pull off the tire. Alright, so we're gonna begin taking this tire off. So the first thing you want to do is you want to get the right size socket to match your lug nuts, or lug bolts in this case. So use a breaker bar, and you want to break these bolts loose while they're on the ground, or else you're not going to be able to break these loose while they're in the air. So the ground kind of helps keeping the tire in place. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 broken loose. So now we're going to begin jacking up the car. Like we said earlier, you want to make sure that the jack's in the right spot. You want to put it in a sturdy place on the pinch weld. Usually most recent vehicles will have an area where it's designated to lift it at. So just start jacking this thing up. We're going to jack it up just high enough to where we can start putting a jack underneath of it, or a jack stand underneath of it. We're going to go ahead and remove the wheel. So just take the socket in your hand, start taking the lug bolts out, or lug nuts. Now that we've got the lug bolts out, just pull your tire off. Sometimes it might need a little bit of force. Sometimes you might just have to tap on the tire a little bit with your hand, and that'll usually take it right off. Alright, now we're going to put the tire back on. So you're going to want to get it back onto the hub. In this case, some cars, they have bolts that come out, and you can just slide the tire on pretty easily. Now, while you're holding this on here, you're going to want to have a lug bolt, in this case, in your hand, or a lug nut. You're going to want to turn the tire and wheel to where the lug holes will line up. Then you can start threading one in by hand. Alright, so now after we got the first one in, you can remove your leg from holding it on. You can just start installing the rest of these. Alright, so now that your lug bolts are hand tight, you're ready to set the car back down on the ground so we can properly torque the lug bolts. So you can begin by getting your jack ready. So make sure it's in the lifting position. Slowly start jacking it up a little bit, just enough so you can pull this release lever. That way the jack stand handle drops down. Begin to remove it, and after that, you want to slowly let your car down. You don't want it to just drop. Alright, so now you're going to want to torque on your lug bolts or lug nuts, whichever you have, with a proper torque wrench. You're going to want to set the torque to somewhere between 90 and 110 foot-pounds. It's probably specific to your manufacturer, but go ahead and set it into the clockwise position to where it tightens the bolt. See how it doesn't click when I'm turning it clockwise? So go ahead and start with any one of them. Doesn't matter on the first one. You're going to want to start turning it, slowly starting to tighten it. And after a few rotations, you should hear the torque wrench click. You see how it clicks like that? That means it's been torqued. So now, moving on from this one, you're gonna wanna go diagonally across or directly across from one. You're basically gonna skip one of the lug nuts. You wanna go in a star pattern. So we're gonna go ahead and begin this one. Same thing, just tighten it up. Wait for the torque wrench to click like that. That means it's been properly tightened. Moving from here in our star pattern, we're gonna move down over this side next to our first one. This one's been a little bit loose because we torqued these ones down, so there's a little bit of thread left. Now we're gonna start torquing this one. Make sure it's torqued when it clicks. Moving on to this one in our star pattern. And onto the last one. Now, after this one, you're gonna wanna go back to your first one. Make sure it's still torqued. As you can see there, it's not fully torqued still anymore. You wanna go till it clicks again. You wanna double check each one. And this one is good. And that's it.